This is not a routine Social Security update, and it is not the kind of headline that should be brushed off as internet noise, because several changes now moving into effect could directly affect how people verify their identity, update their payments, repay old benefit debts, and understand work-related benefit reductions. The important point is not that everyone's check is suddenly at risk, and it is not that every retiree needs to panic. The real story is that the system is tightening in several places at once, and for retirees, near retirees, disabled beneficiaries, surviving spouses, and family members who help manage benefits, knowing the details can make the difference between staying ahead of a problem and being caught off guard by a letter, a frozen process, or a missing payment. There are 4 major rule and process changes connected to the period around May 15th, and each one carries a different kind of impact. Stricter identity verification, tighter rules for direct deposit changes, a tougher approach to recovering overpayments, and updated earnings limits for people who claim benefits before full retirement age while continuing to work. Here's where it gets interesting. None of these changes exists in isolation, because together they show a Social Security system trying to reduce fraud, collect money it says was paid incorrectly, and modernize its procedures, while many of the people most affected are older, less digitally connected, or living far from a local office. The first change centers on identity verification, and this is the one that has created the most immediate confusion for many beneficiaries and applicants. The Social Security Administration has been tightening how it confirms identity, especially for people who cannot be fully verified through the online My Social Security portal. For some applicants and some current beneficiaries, that means the process may no longer be handled entirely online or over the phone. Instead, they may be told to appear in person at a local Social Security office to prove who they are. The key detail is that this does not automatically apply to every person receiving benefits. Someone who is already getting payments and has not changed anything important in their record, such as their name, address, bank account, or other identifying information, is probably not affected immediately. But if someone is applying for benefits, recently changed direct deposit information, or could not be confirmed through the automated verification system, that person may receive a notice requiring additional action, and in some cases, that action may involve visiting an office in person. That distinction matters because the change is not a blanket cutoff of benefits, and it should not be framed as the government suddenly removing everyone from the rolls. The stated purpose is fraud prevention, and that concern is real. Social Security loses hundreds of millions of dollars every year, and some estimates place losses from fraudulent claims and identity theft close to $1 billion. So stronger verification is understandable on paper. But there is another side to this, and it is the practical side that matters to real people. The Social Security Administration has been closing field offices quietly over the years, and while roughly 1,200 field offices remain across the country, that number can sound more comforting than it actually is when the daily life of the average older beneficiary is considered. Millions of older Americans do not drive. Many do not live near reliable public transportation. And in rural areas, a local office may be 60, 70, or even 90 miles away. So when a rule says someone can simply come in person, that phrase can hide a serious burden. An office visit may mean arranging transportation, asking a relative to take time off work, paying for a long ride, managing mobility limitations, or navigating a confusing appointment system. Now notice this tension. The government is trying to solve identity theft by requiring more in-person verification, but the in-person network has been shrinking, and that makes the solution harder for precisely the people who may need the most help using it. That does not mean fraud prevention is wrong, but it does mean the rollout could create new friction, especially for people who have limited transportation, limited digital skills, or limited support at home. The second change is closely connected to the first, but it is more specific and could affect more people than many realize because it deals with direct deposit changes. In the past, a beneficiary could call Social Security and request that their payment be sent to a different bank account by providing the necessary information over the phone, such as a new account and routing number. Under the new restrictions moving in this spring, that phone-based option is being significantly limited. Direct deposit changes requested by phone now require additional verification steps, and in many situations, beneficiaries will be directed to use the online portal or appear at a local office in person before the change can be completed. Again, the reasoning is fraud prevention. Scammers have increasingly targeted older beneficiaries by pretending to be representatives from Social Security and convincing them to reroute benefit payments into fraudulent accounts. From the agency's point of view, restricting phone-based bank changes removes one of the easiest pathways for that kind of theft. That logic is clear, and it is hard to argue against protecting someone's monthly benefit from criminals. But the real-world impact is more complicated, because online access is not universal among older Americans. About 15% of Americans aged 65 and older do not use the internet regularly, and that is not a small group. It represents millions of people. For those beneficiaries, being told to use the online My Social Security portal may not be a realistic solution. Some may not have a computer, some may not have reliable internet service, some may not feel comfortable entering banking information online, and some may struggle with passwords, identity questions, or multi-step security prompts. When the online path is not workable, the alternative may be an in-person office visit, which brings the story right back to the same access problem created by office distance, transportation limits, and the shrinking field office footprint. What stands out is that the people least likely to manage an online account easily may also be the people most likely to find an office visit difficult. That does not make the anti-fraud measure unnecessary, but it does make the burden uneven. A younger retiree with reliable internet, a smartphone, and a nearby office may experience this as a minor inconvenience. An 82-year-old widow without email, living far from public transit, may experience it as a serious obstacle to keeping her payment information current. This is why the issue should not be reduced to a simple argument for or against security. The deeper question is how to protect beneficiaries from fraud without making legitimate beneficiaries struggle to access their own benefits. The third change may be the most serious for household budgets, and it has not received enough attention compared with the identity and direct deposit rules. This change involves Social Security overpayments, which happen when the agency later determines that someone received more money than they were supposed to receive. Overpayments can happen for many reasons. A beneficiary may have had part-time income that was not reported correctly, a change in eligibility may not have been processed quickly, or the agency itself may have calculated a payment incorrectly. For years, Social Security has had a process for recovering that money, and under a 2024 policy update, the default withholding rate for recovery was reduced to 10% of a person's monthly benefit. That softer approach was designed to prevent people from suddenly losing too much of their monthly income. Now that policy is being reversed, and the agency is moving back toward withholding 100% of monthly benefits in some overpayment recovery cases. In plain English, that means if Social Security says a beneficiary owes money back, the agency may, in certain circumstances, withhold the person's entire monthly check until the debt is recovered, unless the beneficiary requests a lower withholding rate or files for a waiver. The numbers show why this matters. Imagine someone receives $2,400 a month in Social Security benefits, and the agency says that person was overpaid $2,800 over the past few years. Under the 2024 policy with a 10% default withholding rate, Social Security would take $140 a month, and the debt would be repaid over 20 months. That would still be painful for many households, but it would be manageable compared with losing an entire check. Under the returning approach, the agency could potentially withhold the full $1,400 payment for 2 months, meaning the person would receive nothing for 2 months while the overpayment is collected. For someone who uses that monthly benefit for rent, groceries, prescriptions, utilities, or transportation, 2 months without a check is not a small administrative inconvenience. It can become an immediate financial crisis. This is where the story becomes more nuanced, because there are appeal rights, waiver options, and ways to request a lower withholding rate. Social Security is not supposed to leave people with no income and no recourse, and beneficiaries can challenge the overpayment, ask for relief, or seek a repayment arrangement that does not take the full benefit at once. But knowing those options exist and successfully using them are two very different things. A person must understand the notice, respond in time, fill out the correct forms, explain their financial situation, and possibly follow up more than once. That may be manageable for someone with strong paperwork skills, a family member helping, or experience dealing with government offices. It can be very different for someone in their mid-70s or older, someone living alone, someone with limited English, someone with health challenges, or someone who does not understand that a confusing notice from years ago may still matter. This change is especially concerning because it combines a harsh financial consequence with a process that many people find difficult to navigate. If someone has ever received a communication from Social Security about an overpayment, even if it arrived years earlier, and even if they believed the matter was resolved, it is important to check the current status before May 15th. The main risk is not only the existence of an overpayment, it is the possibility that a person may not realize collection action can become much more aggressive until a payment is reduced or missing. The fourth change is different in tone, and for some people it may be neutral or even somewhat positive, because it involves the retirement earnings test and updated earnings limits for 2025. This rule applies to people who claim Social Security benefits before reaching full retirement age while still working and earning wages or self-employment income. When someone is under full retirement age for the entire year and earns more than the allowed annual amount, Social Security temporarily withholds part of their benefits. For 2025, the exempt amount for someone under full retirement age for the entire year is $22,320 annually, which equals about $1,960 per month. Once earnings go above that limit, Social Security withholds $1 in benefits for every $2 earned over the threshold. The limit is much higher in the year a person reaches full retirement age. In that year, the earnings limit rises to $59,520. After a person reaches full retirement age, the earnings test disappears completely, and they can earn any amount without having their Social Security benefit reduced under that test. This rule is one of the most misunderstood parts of Social Security, because many people believe the money withheld under the earnings test is gone forever. It is not. The benefits withheld because of the earnings test are later credited back once the person reaches full retirement age, usually through a higher monthly benefit going forward. In that sense, the reduction is more like a deferral than a permanent loss, but timing matters, and that is the part many explanations fail to emphasize. If a 63-year-old worker is receiving Social Security early and also working, the withheld money may eventually be reflected in a higher payment, but that does not help if the person needs cash immediately to cover living costs. For households with very little cushion, a temporary reduction can still create real stress, even if the money is not technically gone forever. Understanding this distinction is critical. Withheld and returned later is not the same as lost permanently, but it can still feel just as painful when the monthly payment is lower and bills are due now. Taken together, these four changes reveal a clear pattern. Social Security is tightening. It is tightening identity checks, tightening bank account change procedures, tightening overpayment recovery, and updating earnings limits that affect people who work while claiming early benefits. Some of that tightening is reasonable and overdue. Fraud is a genuine problem. Scammers do target beneficiaries. Identity theft does drain money from the system. The overpayment backlog reportedly reached more than $23 billion, and that is a major administrative failure that needs to be addressed. But the human impact cannot be separated from the policy goal. When a large system tightens its rules, the extra friction does not always land on the people causing the problem. Scammers adapt. Organized fraud operations change tactics. People with resources find workarounds. The people most likely to be hurt by complicated rules are often those with the least ability to navigate them. The retiree who does not use email, the widow who cannot drive, the beneficiary in rural Montana who lives far from a Social Security office, the person who got one confusing overpayment letter 3 years ago and assumed the issue had gone away. That is why these changes matter beyond the paperwork. Social Security is not a side benefit for many Americans. It is the foundation of their monthly income. For roughly 40% of retirees, it provides more than 50% of their income. For about 15%, it is essentially their only income. So when the system changes verification rules, payment change procedures, debt collection methods, or work-related benefit limits, the consequences are not abstract. They show up in rent payments, grocery budgets, prescription refills, utility bills, and the ability to get through the month without borrowing money or skipping something essential. The most practical takeaway is simple but important. First, identity verification is stricter, and some people may need to verify themselves in person if the online system cannot confirm them or if certain account changes trigger additional checks. Second, direct deposit changes by phone are being restricted, so beneficiaries may need to use the online portal or visit an office, with extra verification involved. Third, overpayment recovery is shifting back toward possible full benefit withholding in some cases, which means anyone with a past or current overpayment notice needs to understand their status, the appeal process, the waiver process, and the option to request a lower withholding rate. Fourth, the 2025 earnings limits are now in effect, with a $22,320 annual limit for those under full retirement age all year, a $59,520 limit in the year full retirement age is reached, and no earnings test reduction after full retirement age. The penalty under the earnings test is not permanent, but the short-term cash flow impact can still be very real. For anyone who thinks one of these changes may apply to them or to a parent, spouse, neighbor, or family member, the most useful step is to log into a My Social Security account at ssa.gov and review the current status carefully. Check whether anything is flagged, look for notices, confirm direct deposit details, and contact the local office if something appears incorrect or unclear. Waiting for a letter to arrive is not always the safest strategy, especially when mail can be delayed, notices can be misunderstood, and deadlines can matter. Social Security has existed for 90 years and it has been adjusted hundreds of times, so change itself is not new. What matters is whether people understand enough of the change to protect themselves. Even partial understanding puts a beneficiary in a stronger position than not knowing what is happening at all. The goal is not to create fear, and it is not to exaggerate the situation. The goal is to make sure people recognize where the system is becoming stricter, where the risks are most likely to appear, and what steps can reduce the chance of being surprised by a payment problem. For many households, Social Security is not a policy debate. It is the monthly money that keeps life stable. And when rules around that money change, awareness becomes one of the most practical protections a person can have. If this information is useful, it is worth staying connected to reliable, plain language updates on Social Security, Medicare, and retirement policy, because the details are often where the real impact is hidden. One question is especially important for anyone listening. Has Social Security ever sent a notice or letter that was difficult to understand, and what did it take to resolve it? The answers to that question often reveal more about how the system works in real life than any official policy document ever could. The most important message is that none of these details should be ignored simply because they sound technical, because a verification rule, a bank change rule, an overpayment rule, or an earnings test rule can all become personal very quickly when a monthly benefit is involved.